One thing that's really nice about this MIE conference, with the size that it's at, is that there's a really diverse group of people here. There's veterans of impact investing as I'm walking around that I'm bumping into, people who I know have been doing this work for 20 or 30 years and have a lot of wisdom to impart. And I'm also meeting a lot of people who are newer to impact investing, who might be on the program side, might be on the investment side, or connecting with each other and learning from each other. So it really feels like the kind of place where there's a space for everyone here. Since 2016, I've built a catalytic capital portfolio that includes our program-related investments, and we're of course looking at a variety of social and environmental impacts within that. But at the portfolio level, one thing that's also been really exciting to see is when investees are able to move and create more sustainability in their models or increase access to different types of capital. And to give a couple examples of that, we were a long-time grant funder of Calvert Impact Capital, and then right around the time where they reached operational sustainability to be able to operate their loan portfolio, we pivoted and wrapped up our grant funding and had a note with their note program. Another example is there's a nonprofit that's California-based called RedF, and they provide support to employment-based social enterprises that are providing pathways to quality employment for people facing barriers such as former incarceration, different kinds of disabilities. And they recently launched an investment fund to really be able to provide capital at greater scale, growth stage capital to investees who can grow their businesses and provide more jobs to people facing barriers to employment. And we made a PRI to them early in the existence of the loan fund. They since have gotten CDFI status, so they're really on a pathway to being able to scale the number and size of the social enterprises they're supporting and the number of jobs available for people facing barriers. And then another example is we made a catalytic investment in the Acumen Latin America Impact Ventures. And when we originally made it, it was a proof of concept fund for companies providing jobs and products and services that are benefiting people living in poverty in Latin America. The second fund was actually approved by our investment advisors on their platform and came out of our private allocation, which is a more market rate return seeking portfolio and which is much larger. So that means that because of the early investment in the proof of concept fund, they've now launched a second fund that has access to more commercial capital. So in addition to the impact of the investees themselves, this ability to see funds moving from a place where they're a little bit less sustainable to grow that sustainability and get to a place where they're accessing commercial capital and then scaling the impact they're having by scaling the size of their funds or the size of capital deployed is another way that we look at impact. The Woodcock Foundation made a 100% mission alignment commitment a few years ago, and so now we're really in a place of trying to deepen the impact that we're having across all of our asset classes and understanding how we can just do more with every dollar that we're deploying. And a lot of our mission now is really also around field building and sharing our model and what we've been able to do, sharing our learning journeys so that other people can learn from our experience as well. And I think my vision for where I would love to see philanthropy get is less of a bifurcation between the grant-making investment sides of the house. When I think about just the dynamic of this 5% and 95%, an analogy I like to think about is that if we had a prospective grantee come to us and they told us, here's our mission, but we're actually only using 5% of our capital to achieve it, and the rest is doing something else, we would have a lot of questions for them. And yet that's how foundations have been set up, and so that's really the norm. So the shift that I would love to see, like many others, is getting to a place where it's the norm for all of your assets to be in service of your mission and for your grant making to be a tool alongside your investing for achieving the kind of impact that you're trying to have. One thing that I think is really important is that there are just so many entry points to impact investing, and you might be a foundation, you might have some other structure that you're deploying capital from. There's no right or wrong way to get started. There are so many different places where you can get started, and so when I was early in my journey, catalytic capital felt like a really obvious place to lean into because of the close relationship between grant making, the deep impact. For people with investment experience, for those who've done advocacy work, shareholder engagement might feel like a place that you can get started, and it's not always the most obvious low-hanging fruit, but it's actually fairly easy to get started with shareholder engagement. So I think wherever you are and whatever capital you have available to you, there's an entry point.